Welcome back to another exciting episode of Iron Therapy. We had a little bit of a hiccup there. I think I need some therapy to fix up this show. But joining us today is, of course, our staff therapist, Leslie Timble. And we have a special guest with us today, Alyssa Carpio, who's an IFBB figure pro, who's getting ready for some competitions in the end of summer. And she volunteered to join us today because she helps a lot of clients deal with our topic of the day, which is anxiety, guys. Leslie, tell us about anxiety.
Oh my gosh, this is such a big topic. We could speak about this every episode for a year and still not cover everything. So I'm really glad we're just starting the process though, Dave, because this is such a big topic for not just bodybuilders, but for people in general. But because it's a bodybuilding channel, the bodybuilders, yes, it's absolutely, because it affects their performance, it affects their mindset, it affects their self-esteem, it affects so many things on so many levels that I can't wait to dive in.
My favorite, and before I let you guys tear this thing apart, my favorite quote or story that Dr. Wayne Dyer, who's one of my mentors, may he rest in peace, used to say about anxiety is, he says, if you ever see a bucket of anxiety, and of course the answer to that is no, right? He goes, well, if you don't have a bucket of it, it's not real. You're making it up because it's not a real fact. But yet people toil with anxiety on a regular basis, in everyday life as well as in our industry. And we fielded a few questions. First, I want to go to Alyssa. Alyssa, what's been your experience? Number one, maybe personally with anxiety, and then how have you been helping people over the years with it? Because it seems to be something that you do in your coaching.
Yeah, well, I've been competing for 20 years, and even before I got into competing, it was just like a life management skill. If you're trying to, focus on personal growth and personal development, like you said, it affects every area of your life. So if you just want to navigate life and have less stress and more peace of mind and not feel like you're, reacting to everything in an extreme manner, then there's all these methods and techniques that can use to reframe your mindset and, deal with heavy emotions and things like that in spite of whatever your circumstances are. So I just over 20 years, just read books, used this tool, used that, and kind of pieced together what worked for me the most. And I think in terms of bodybuilding, most of us that are drawn to this sport are the same as far as we're, type A's, we're driven, and we're always solution oriented. So a lot of the mindset techniques and the mind reframing techniques were what resonated with me the most, because I'm okay, what am I going to do about it? Bodybuilders are doers.
What was the best thing? What was the thing that worked the best for you?
Yeah. So I started with perspective shifting. All right. And I started with goal reframing. So most people, when they start competing, they're okay, my goal is to win this show, right? After you do a couple shows and you don't win, because you're not going to win every show or most of them, you're okay, I got to sort of detach myself and my self-worth from how I place. I can't control how I place. I can't control even what the judge thinks of me. So I'm going to reframe my goals into just coming in at my best for this competition, whatever that is, my idea of my best, right? And sometimes we can control those things, sometimes we can't. But the longer that you do it, I think it becomes more about the process of, one thing I can control is I can, stick to my diet every day for this 3-month prep. I can not miss any training sessions. I can do this or that. So it became to me just about the process of the effort that I put into it rather than the outcome, because you can't control. So when we think about anxiety, that's really what anxiety is. It's, this sensation that we have that we've attached to a desirable outcome, and we're afraid that we're not going to get that outcome. So you really have to focus on the present moment and take yourself out of 2 weeks ahead or 3 months ahead or whatever it is, and just focus on that day. Sometimes you just have to focus on that minute and what you're doing right then, because the more you project yourself down the road, the more it builds up. And I remember Chris Bumstead, I think a couple preps ago, when he wasn't ready, he wasn't pacing on properly, right, for the Olympia. He was very behind. It'd be interesting to talk to him about it, but he went through that where he was I just don't think I'm going to be ready. But so he was sort of shutting that part of his head away, which isn't really a way of dealing with it, but then just focusing on the everyday tasks. And bodybuilding is just about doing all those things. They're not all difficult things, but we have to do them consistently, and then they all add up to that
Right.
big thing. So I think that when you're talking about the sport, it's a couple things. It's what you're level at now and where you want to be. So if you're coming into it and you've never competed before and you try to do everything in your life that's something like Olympian is doing, you know, you're not going to be able to put all those behaviors and actions into place yet. You got to start with just a few things, like maybe you're counting your macros. That's step one. You know, after each of these things becomes like a solid behavior that you don't have to think about anymore, like taking a shower, then you can like add another layer onto that. So that's how you continue to evolve through the sport without becoming overwhelmed.
Leslie, what I do is when I feel like I have too many things to do, I pretend I won the lottery and then I won $400 million, and I start thinking about how would I walk around if I had $400 million. Like I really wouldn't care about anything, right? Because nothing would really matter because I can afford to do anything. I don't need to work. So I walk around like I won 400 million, and that takes all the stress off me right there.
Well, money won't solve everything. It helps.
Yeah,
It can certainly help.
What's your perspective on this, Leslie? What Alyssa's been talking about?
I love what Alyssa said, because I do a lot of that, you know, as far as reframe. It's the term is reframing. So if you think about a picture, the picture is what's going on in your life. So if you think about, if you have a picture, it doesn't matter what the picture is, if you put it in kind of a boring frame, or depending on the frame, it doesn't highlight the picture. If you have a better frame, it can really accentuate and really show that picture off better. So think of that like your mind. You take your mind as the picture, and if you put a proper border on it, and when I say the border, I'm using that as a metaphor for expectations. A lot of times people will go on these shows and they expect to win. When I work with athletes, I say you train to win, but you don't expect to win. There is a difference, because it's important to be realistic. If you do not win that show, how does that reflect on you as a person? How do you interpret that? If you say, oh, I'm a loser, there's an issue there. You have to look about your expectations to saying, okay, you know what? Someone came in better. Does that make you a loser? No, it does not. And it's also attaching certain concepts to your identity. So if it's, I feel better about myself if I win a show, if that has to do with your identity, there's an issue. Now, it can help complement it, but it shouldn't define it. And there's a difference there. Right. So a lot of it has to do with reframing, which I love, and I use the pivoting piece as well. But I also love what Alyssa said about being more centered. When your mind is wander, it's not a matter of what happens if how do I stop my mind from wandering? You're not. You're a human being. How do you rope that back in? It's like a toddler who like runs away. How do you rope that person back in? Your mind is like that toddler. It runs away all the time. You got to rope it back in, focusing on the present moment. And that could be in that second of that day. And what I tell people is, how many senses do you have? Let's use them. What do you see right now? What do you see? If you're in a gym, if you're at work, wherever you're at, where's your focus supposed to be? If you're on a court, if you're a basketball player, where's the ball? Where are your opponents? Where's your fellow teammates? What's your job in that second right now? Just focus right in. And that's the thing. A lot of people get distracted. Yeah. And it's not a matter of, well, don't get distracted. It's how fast can you bring your attention back? Right. And that's what people have to practice. And I help people do that. And again, this is not just during prep. This has got to be practiced in your off season. So it's a mind thing. A lot of the anxiety is your response to being unprepared for things. You got to prepare for the unexpected, and there is a way to do that.
I remember when I used to take this yoga class, and when I first walked into the class, I felt like I was like an insane like lunatic who needed to be locked up. I was so nervous. Everyone looked so peaceful in this class, and I couldn't relax. And after, of course, doing it a month or two, I became that relaxed person too. But the real trick was, when we were doing our exercises, they would come around these little skinny little, Korean girl who probably weighed 70 pounds, and she'd say, David, where is your mind? And of course, my mind was like thinking about I had to go to the gym, and I had to go here, and I have to call this person up after the class. And every time she said that, it would bring me right back to where I was. And I kept saying, yeah, I got to focus on what I'm doing right now. I can't be thinking about, because I was creating anxiety for myself while I'm in this yoga class, which is supposed to be relaxing me. So, it's important to have your mind present in what you're doing. Now, we had a couple of questions that we had put up. We put up a post on Instagram. We got a couple of questions. And one of the questions came from a guy who said that he was an over planner, meaning that bodybuilding was great for him, but all he did was plan. He was planning this and planning that. And he was actually getting anxiety from over planning. Like if he didn't have like 5 days worth of food in his house, he was panicking that maybe he should go to the supermarket and stuff like that. What do you tell someone who's like an over planner, Les?
So the thing is that there's something called illogic and there's something called emotion. So logically, he knows he's prepared. He's got his meals prepared. Even if he leaves the house or he goes on vacation or whatever, he brings his meals, he's still focusing on the what ifs. And again, it's that mind going in a place that doesn't need to go. It's refocusing on right now, just saying, but I've got my meals right in front of me. Sometimes it's right in front of our face, but we don't want to accept it. So there goes the problem. Go down deeper. What's preventing this guy, and he's not alone, by the way, from being able to say, hey, I know I have the facts. They're right in front of me. I can't accept them. It's not going through my thick skull. It's because there's a barrier there. It's not just a matter of saying, well, you have your food in front of you. Of course, you're fine. You've prepared everything. You shouldn't be worrying. There's something deeper. It's like he can't trust his behavior, and there's something deeper going behind that. A lot of athletes don't trust their skills in various areas, and this is so food prep is not necessarily a skill, but it's one piece. They don't trust what they have in place.
Right. I never found, like, I was a planner, definitely, especially when I was dieting for show. I had all my meals prepared and I wanted to make sure I knew what was going on. And if anything threw a monkey wrench into my schedule, it was aggravating to me, to be honest with you. But I knew that if as long as I checked all the boxes of everything I had to do for the day, I really wasn't like to the point where I was sitting around thinking about more things to have anxiety about. You know what I mean? Like, it almost seems like he's got everything under control, this guy, but then it's not enough that he got it under control. He's got to think about more things that really have no relevance to what he should be worrying about. I mean, if he doesn't have a 6th day of food in the house and he knows he can go to the supermarket any day he wants, there's no reason to be worrying about that. So why do people go that extra step of obsession, obsessive compulsive behavior?
Sometimes it's habit and sometimes it's an overcompensation. It's if I don't think about it, or if I don't actually stress about this, I'm not prepared, and it might catch me it might catch me when I'm on an off moment, which doesn't happen. And there's also if I stress about it, then it won't happen. So it's kind of, right. Sometimes we do the self-sabotaging thing too.
Mm-hmm. Alyssa, what has been your experience with people maybe who are over planners, people who like never think they've done enough to get ready, even though they know they've checked every box that they have to check? They're worrying about stuff that they shouldn't even be worrying.
Yeah. I actually like to use like my notes on my phone, and sometimes I use different apps to just like set myself reminders for things. So, once my supplements, I don't know which ones I'm taking on what days. So I use like a medication app to track that. Yeah. And I use my notes every time something comes up, like, oh man, I need to buy chicken tonight. I'll just make that note. And then like once it's written down, it's like out of your mind and you can release it and just move on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, you have to really, at some point, you have to stop worrying about stuff that you really have no control over, It's like the people who, when they say there's going to be like a snowstorm or there's going to be like a hurricane, and they go out and they buy like 25 days worth of food from the supermarket, as if they're not going to be able to leave their house, for 6 weeks or something like that. I never understood those people. I don't understand why people felt the need to stock up on everything, knowing very well that if you're lucky, if you're unlucky, you might get stuck not being able to go to the store for 1 day, 2 days max. Why do you need 6 weeks worth of stuff in the house? And most of it's going to go bad and spoil, and you have to throw in the garbage anyway. But that's the mentality, right? We make people afraid, and I think it's a fear. That's what I really think it is. It's fear that they're.
Some people actually, they don't think that they do, but they like to live in that state where they're always kind of creating problems for themselves. They function in that state because then they're like, okay, now I can come up with a solution. So it's like
Right.
we create a problem and a challenge just so we can come up with an answer for it
Mhm.
that never was a problem in the beginning.
Now, another aspect of anxiety that some people experience, and I've worked with people like this too, is the person who's maybe been fat when they were younger, and then they lost weight, and then they think they're too skinny, and they never find like a happy medium, and they're always worried about how people are judging them. Am I too big? I mean, am I too fat or out of shape? And then when they get ripped and they get in contest shape, their parents, it usually comes from their parents. The parents say, "Oh, you're too skinny," and no one ever feels like they never feel like they're comfortable in their own skin, no matter how they look. What do you tell a person like that?
Well, see, here's the thing. It's the thing is that this particular question, I did read it on the RX Muscle Instagram post. In this particular case, this individual is reflecting his feelings based on how other people's feedback. So he's looking for what we call social approval. So he wants basically other people to be supportive. So if he's thin, saying, "Hey, I lost weight," or if I have muscles, I think on the post he was saying that people are saying that he's arrogant because he's got muscles, and he's not arrogant. It's just that he's confident. There's a difference between arrogance and confidence. So what I tell people is, there's 3 words I want people to remember. Consider the source. 3 words. Consider the source. So if you're going to be doing any kind of research or getting kind of good feedback, are you going to the National Enquirer? Probably not. So, it's about, why don't you go to the National Enquirer? Well, because gossipy, because they do their own narrative, because it's a lot of bullshit. But anyway, it's more about saying, okay, who can I trust if I need that constructive feedback that is more in the know? The average person is not going to be in the know when it comes to a bodybuilder, and they won't have that understanding of what we go through, what's considered normal, what's not considered normal, or healthy or not healthy. So when someone looks in the mirror, when someone gets feedback and they say, "Oh, you're arrogant," I tell people, okay, let's consider that. Is there a possibility that you're arrogant? What would that be based on? Don't base it on just what that person is saying. What about the people in your closer circle who understand you and what you do? Do they give you that feedback? And is it in certain situations too versus others? And maybe you're not arrogant at all. Maybe you're just confident. Maybe you're just, proud of your body because you work so bloody hard for it.
Right. Well, also, Leslie, a lot of people, fall victim to the trolls online. Like if someone says that I look like a reptile, and then I go start asking people, "Hey, do I look like a reptile?" Like, if I believe, if I allow the good opinion of others to influence me, I'm out of my fucking mind. Especially online, people will fuck with you all the time. The better thing to do would be like say, "Yes, I am arrogant. I'm very arrogant and very confident about how I look." Too bad. If you don't like it, don't go to my channel or don't come to my page. Isn't really Instagram and Facebook and all social media just about showing off, what and what you look like? I mean, that's what it is, and people like going there. But there's going to always be people that are jealous or people that want to put you down because it makes them feel better about themselves. If you can't handle doing that, you shouldn't even be on social media. And I tell this to bodybuilders a lot because a lot of bodybuilders cannot take constructive criticism. I'm like, you should not even be on social media. If you cannot, and you shouldn't even be in bodybuilding, to be honest with you, if you can't take constructive criticism, because it's a sport of criticism. No one looks at you on stage and says, "Oh, this is great, that's great, this is great." They say, "This is wrong with you and that's wrong with you," right? And fix this and fix that. You got to have a very strong, mental fortitude to be able to handle that.
For sure. Did you have any thoughts on that,
Agree
Alyssa?
with that. Yeah. I see it as a couple different things. I see it as, he could be talking about feedback from the judges and people sort of in the sport. And he could also be talking about people in his direct circle, his family and friends. And there's a couple of things. Sometimes when people that you think will support you, your closest allies, when they see you getting better at anything in life, sometimes they don't like that. And it can be projected as judgment. So I think I've had many clients that weren't even competitors where they would lose 20 or 30 pounds and their mom would be like, "You're starting to look kind of unhealthy. I don't think you should lose anymore." And they still were maybe 20 pounds overweight.
Right.
So it just makes people feel uncomfortable when they see other people achieving success. They don't like that because it's sort of like reflective of them not going for whatever the thing is that they're going for. But for sure, you have to be solid in what look it is you want to go for. All right. And you can't just be like, well, I'm going to change it to this look now that this judge said that or this person said that. Like, you have to be comfortable with the look you're going for, and you have to be able to remove your self-worth from that even. And not be like, oh, gee, like I'm fat now because I gained 20 pounds in my off season. Everything's for a purpose, So I think like that has to happen, that sort of separation of self-worth from how you look and more like how people react to how you look. Are you doing it to please them or yourself? So if you're doing it to please yourself because you're trying to be better at your craft and excel at an elite level, then, you have to just whisk that stuff away. And when you think about any other successful industry, if someone's a pro athlete or a celebrity, like they've all done that. And if you look at the top people in our sport, they still get trolled on their social media. They ignore it.
Yeah.
So you have to separate that, I think, and just be confident in what you want for yourself.
I think also, if you put up a transformation picture where you went from being, off season to pre-contest or, in contest shape, I don't see that as arrogant. I think that's motivational. Yeah. If you go and however, and you're like a drug dealer and you're buying like Ferraris and you're driving it around and saying, fuck everyone, that's arrogant. I mean, come on, there is a difference, Yeah. For anyone to be upset with, for anyone to take anyone seriously to make them think that they're being arrogant because they're showing their progress, just block that person if it's bothering you. You shouldn't even listen to it,
If you're also the person that's asking, gee, am I an arrogant person? Then you probably know you're not, because you're worried about those people flying around with their middle finger up. They're not saying, gee, I wonder if I'm being arrogant right now.
They know they are, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What, Leslie, when we talk about anxiety, what's in your practice, what's the number one thing people are most anxious about? It doesn't have to be bodybuilding related.
Honestly, it is about what other people think on what, to some degree, for sure. It can be parents, it could be their, especially family. Family is a big one. Whether it's not having their approval, whether it's a career, whether it's someone they're dating, whether, it's, if it's good enough that as far as what they're doing in their life, as far as money or whatever, that's a big piece.
Yeah. I think money is a big source of anxiety for a lot of people. Even people who have money, it's a big source, because when you have more money, you spend more money. And so when you spend more money, you have more bills, which means that if you don't have a good month, one month, you can be in the hole pretty quickly, so to speak. What do you think is the best technique, Leslie, if you had to give advice to people watching right now to deal and cope with anxiety, no matter what's causing it?
There's a 2-tier approach that I use with anxiety. One is, if someone's having a lot of anxiety, we need to bring that anxiety down. So if we're at if level 10 is a super high level of anxiety, and panic attacks are a totally different ball game because it's extremely high. But we need, even in panic attacks, what we need to do first is bring that level down from, let's say, a 10 to a 7 or an 8. Because unless you bring that anxiety down, the ability to use your brain and use a technique to problem solve is not going to happen. Because when we have a high level of anxiety, we become that deer in the headlights. We just freeze. So it's about bringing down the anxiety through various techniques. I use cognitive behavioral therapy. And then we use techniques to be able to problem solve through that issue. Mm-hmm. So there's different techniques I help people with, again, to bring down the level of anxiety and to solve the issue at the time. And part of the solving the issue has to do with, what can I do about the situation right now? And Alyssa referred this earlier, is controlling the controllables. Because the anxiety is usually focusing on stuff that's out of your control. It's bringing it back to saying, what can I do about this situation? Not what can someone else do? What can I do?
I personally think that, talking to someone, therapy is a much better way of dealing with anxiety than medication. But there are a lot of people who are medicated. I know, because I work with a lot of people, and they're on all kinds of different anxiety medications, which I think sometimes it makes it worse. But then they take anabolic steroids on top of that, which obviously can increase the anxiety level, in a person, especially people who have anxiety to begin with. What do you advise those people? Here they are, they're on anabolics, which they have anxiety to begin with. Then they're on anabolics, and then they have to take Xanax to calm themselves down. And then, of course, when you start mixing things around, you have good days, you have bad days. What's the solution? I would think the solution, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or right, would be to get rid of as much drug interaction and try to do more behavioral therapy.
Ideally, yes. Now if we're talking about bodybuilders, and let's say they're in prep, they're not going to necessarily, if they want to continue being in prep, we can't necessarily take away a lot of the stuff that they're on. But what we can do is say, hey, are there things that can help you get some of the results you can that don't have those type of side effects?
Right.
Now, obviously, you want to try to do this more, not when they're in prep, because, you don't want to do the experimentation thing when you're in prep.
Usually when people are in prep, though, they're much better, like Alyssa said, because they're so focused on the show. It's when they get done with the show that they don't know what to do with themselves. That's when I find that the people have way more anxiety.
It's a lack of planning. A lot of times people, after they focus so much on the show, which is important, but then once the show is done, they're like, oh shit, now what?
Yeah.
And they don't have a goal. They don't have a plan. Some people don't have an idea of what they're going to eat. And I don't mean after the show, but after, like, having a plan of what do you do after the show from an eating perspective so you don't blow up.
Right.
You can indulge, but let's put a plan into place, whether it's to go back to, let's say, 3 weeks before the show and start eating like that and slowly increase your carbs or whatever that might be. But they don't have a plan. And it's not just eating. It's not just even going back to the gym. How about life? How about your goal about resetting your body and your hormones and stuff like that? How about if you're not going to compete for a while, what's another goal you can put in your life? People don't plan the aftermath, and that's why you can have those postpartum blues too, which is a completely different show.
Yeah, exactly. I always found that after a show, whether I did good or bad, I was right back to work because I had my next goal in mind of what I wanted to do, whether it be gain muscle. But I do deal with a lot of people who, after a show, they lose their focus and they don't like the way they look anymore. They're getting bloated, maybe, even though they may not be fat. Their motivation to go to the gym is not there anymore because it's like they have like a whole year now till the next show, and they just lack that focus. And then, of course, once they start wandering and not making progress, that creates more anxiety in them, of course, which kind of mushrooms the whole thing back to. But that's why I tell people it's good to have a coach in the off season too, so you have accountability to someone,
And a plan. I mean, it's that whole, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So have a game plan, have someone to be accountable for that, and you'll manage way better.
Alyssa, in your 20 years that you've been, helping people out, what would you say is the most common, I guess you could say, maybe fear or anxiety that people have, and have you found that you were successful in helping people navigate that?
Well, a lot of people, I think, they're afraid that they can't do whatever it is they think they're going to do to get to whatever level they're on, whether they're just a normal person trying to get in shape, or they're trying to get to a national show and turn pro, or they're trying to get to the Olympia. They all feel like they base everything like on their past self, and they think that their past is who they are. And they're like, I'm never going to be able to do this because I always screw this up, or I always screw that up, or this is the point in my prep where I'm going to go and eat 2 pizzas and mess it up, So it's like the fear of self-sabotage and relying too much on the past. The past is great when we have like successful experiences to bounce back off, and that propels us like, oh, I know I can do this because I did this last time. Easy. But if it's like a negative experience like that, we can just keep thinking this is just who we are and we're destined for this fate, no matter what. Like I can't make it through a prep because the last 2 times I quit or whatever, I'm a quitter. So just to like get people to think you can actually just redefine who you are at any point in your life. And we're going to write a list of the behaviors and the actions that person would do every day. Whether that's Chris Bumstead, Ashley Kaltwasser, whoever, what do you think they would do every day in their life if that's what you want to be, a champion? And you sort of have to just say, this is a champion. These are their behaviors. This is their mindset, and just make a choice to do it really, to say once I decide to do this thing, I'm going to do it. Whatever that little, tiny little choice. Like once I decide to get up at 5:30 a.m., I'm getting up at 5:30 a.m. And it's a process to know you're not going to just put all these things in place in a week. You know, every year it gets easier to add things to that and get better at it.
I have so many little protocols and little things I have to do every day that the list is almost infinite at this point. You know, thank God they're all completely ground into my brain subconsciously, so I don't have to think about doing them anymore. But You're right, you can't add them all at once. You have to do it a little at a time, and that list will get longer as you get older. I promise you guys that. Leslie, final words.
Yeah, guys, just know that you're not alone when you're having this anxiety. And then, you know, what I do want to actually just put out there, Dave, is help, because I would love to do an Instagram live. Now, the thing is, I can do it from my phone. I use a Chromebook, and I would love to do Instagram live on my Chromebook, but I need to do some type of attachment. So if anyone out there knows something about technology, which is probably going to be everybody more than I do, if you know like of a free app that I can attach to my Chromebook so I can look at the questions better and be able to do an Instagram live, let me know what program or app that would be, because I'd love to do an Instagram live and continue talking about anxiety, because it's such a big topic. I'd love to do a bunch of those Instagram lives. So if anyone can comment below, that would be great.
Absolutely. Well, Alyssa, thank you for joining us. I know you got to pick your son up at the bus, so we're going to be going to pick our kids up as well. And as Wayne Dyer said, remember that quote: "There's no such thing as a bucket of anxiety." I'm Dave Palumbo with Leslie Timble and our special guest, Alyssa Carpio. We'll see you next time.